Is the mic on? Okay, yeah, it's working. Let's start. Hello, everyone. Hola. I hope you've had a great day, and hopefully you have some energy left for the last session of today. I'm going to be talking about the Markup the Drupal 8 way. There's going to be lots of PHP and lots of things related to the theme system in this session. There's also going to be some tweak. Hopefully you will find it interesting. My name is Lauri Eskola. My funny accent comes from Finland. I don't know if you follow Formula, but you probably know Kimi Räikkönen, Mika Häkkinen. I have the same accent as them, but yeah. I'm a Drupal theme system co-maintainer. I work for a Finnish Drupal company called Druid. I also love kittens, and besides loving kittens, I love learning Spanish. What I learned yesterday was hola, capaz, estudias o trabajas. And I heard that is an important thing to learn. I hope that it doesn't cause any trouble for me. I also like the break party. So let's start with the topic itself, the theme system. And here is the basic steps of theme system. I'm going to cover them at first, how this works in Drupal 8. This is very similar to what Drupal 7 has. There is small differences, but in most parts, it's the same as in Drupal 7. In the end, I'm going to explain some of the best practices that I figured out myself while working with theme system. And I'm going to also explain what are the next steps, how are we going to improve from this, what we have right now. So what is going to happen, maybe some of this will happen even during Drupal 8, before Drupal 9. But some of it might be something that happens when Drupal 9 gets released. So a link for the repo where the code examples can be found is here. So you can see a working module which has the snippets that I'm going to show you in this presentation, and you can copy it and use it for whatever you prefer. So let's start on the first step, which is the hook theme implementation. Hook theme implementation is a hook, obviously, because it's called hook theme. And in the hook theme, you provide a hook theme implementations. And hook theme implementations are renderable items. And the metadata related to that renderable item is collected in the hook theme. And I'm creating a hook theme implementation called Sandwich over here. It's a little bit confusing because of the name of the module is also Sandwich. So this is the name of the module, and this is the name of the theme hook that I'm creating. And in here, I provide the metadata related to that hook theme implementation. The most common one that you will need always, the minimum requirement, is to have the variables that you are able to pass along for the template. And the reason why we have this variable setting in the hook theme implementation is that we want to make sure that these values exist always when something is happening in the theme system. So if one of the values of the variables is missing, it will get the default value from the hook theme implementation. So that, let's say, if you are writing a preprocessor function, or if you're using a templating engine that does throw some error messages if a variable doesn't exist, it would come from the hook theme implementation as an empty default value, and it wouldn't throw an error. So let's say if you're printing a name, but you don't say if name and it doesn't exist, it would throw a warning for that. But if it's set as an empty value in here, it doesn't throw anything. On the right-hand side, you can see a render array. Render array is the only way of outputting markup in Drupal 8. In Drupal 7, it used to be possible to return either markup or a render array. But in Drupal 8, you are only able to pass a render array. That is not totally correct, because you are also able to return a response, but almost the true. Render array or response, those are the two things you can return. Only way to return markup is the render array. In here, you can see the same variables that we've set here, but they are prefixed with the hash. The reason for the hash prefix is because we want to identify the variables using the hash key. Because if you don't have the hash key over there, it is considered as a children render array, which means that it's another render array and will be rendered separately. If it's a hash, it will be passed as a variable for the template, as it is. You can also see some additional metadata that is being added in this render array. I'm attaching some libraries. It is just a reference that I'm going to use in future in this presentation, how we could do this otherwise, because this sandwich should be always attached when sandwiches are printed. But let's proceed on the theme system for now. The next step, after the render array has been returned, what's going to happen in the theme system is that we are gathering together the theme suggestions. And there's two levels of creating theme suggestions. There is the hook theme suggestions, and there is an alter function, hook theme suggestions alter, for altering the already existing theme suggestions that has been added by the hook theme suggestions. If you don't know what the theme suggestions are, here's a good, very well-known example, which is the node template. You're able to override that with the node -- node type template. Oops, that's PHP. You don't have to care about that. It's supposed to be a twig. Anyway, so you can override the node base template specifically for a node type or a node ID. In Drupal 8, there is actually even more ways than that. But this is what most of the people recognize. That is nothing magic. That's just an API that exists in Drupal and that Drupal core uses. You can create your own theme suggestions very easily. It happens usually using the hook theme suggestions function. You can see the first one. So here, the sandwich means the name of the module. The second sandwich over here means the name of the hook theme implementation. So we are creating theme suggestions for a specific theme suggestions that was for a specific hook theme implementation, which is the sandwich. What happens here? I'm simply returning one additional theme suggestion, which is in this case specific very handy to see which team is actually holding that template. Because if you copy the template from from team, obviously you would have a markup change that you are not expecting, which is not very nice. But using this tool, you can find where the template is located. After the team suggestions, what happens is we go to the preprocess level. Preprocess functions are something that probably are going to be removed at some point, so use them carefully. I'm going to show some examples where they are being used, but they probably shouldn't be used that much anymore for anything. If someone looks at Drupal core and looks at the preprocess functions, that is not the good way to use preprocess functions. Drupal core is not using them the right way. The problem is that we didn't have enough time to figure it out. What are we going to do with the preprocess functions? So don't take example on the preprocess functions from Drupal core itself. It doesn't really matter that much of normal site builder or someone theming a site. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but it's annoying for the people actually maintaining Drupal core because of the logic is everywhere and it's hard to test. So that's why we want to get rid of the preprocess functions. So the preprocess functions are functions that are being run before a variable is being passed from the render array into the template so that you can modify it still in the PHP into another form than what it is right now. I'm just using it for a very, very simple use case where I'm changing the name of the sandwich into a hard-coded one so that the name of the sandwich is always the same. So the first preprocess function that is being run is template preprocess. And template preprocess function is kind of a hook, but it is not an actual hook because there can be only one instance of this function. So that only the module providing the hook team implementation should be implementing this hook. You shouldn't use the template preprocess function ever in a team or in another module for a team hook implementation that you haven't created yourself. So this is the first one that is being run. The good thing about template preprocess function is that if you need to do preprocessing in your module specifying the hook team implementation, is that this function is always being run before the hook preprocess functions, which can be in all the different modules and teams, and they can then trust that the preprocessing for the template in the template preprocess function has been run before these are called. The hook preprocess functions are called in an order that which is based on the weight of the modules. So that is not something that you can really trust, that if another module is modifying something on the preprocess function, that it would always happen before something happens in another module, because of the weights can change. But what you can trust is that all the preprocess functions for the base hook team implementation has been run before you're creating a preprocess function in a team. That's what you can trust. What happens after the hook preprocess functions is that there is a specific preprocess functions. So you can even create a preprocess function for the specific implementation of a template. So if you have a team suggestion based on the name of the sandwich, you could create a preprocess function for one specific implementation of that template. And the fun thing that you can see is that I'm changing here the name of the variable, but because of I'm changing this variable name, which is used in the team suggestion to create in the hook team suggestion to create the team suggestion. Even though I change it here, because the team suggestions are created before this, it doesn't affect the team suggestions at all. And this is still being run if the original name of the sandwich was Chicago. Also, the template sandwich dash Chicago would be loading. There is 3 good examples in Drupal core about converting preprocess functions into a twig. And if you have lots of preprocessed functions in your client project or whatever project you are working on, a content module, you could take a look maybe on these issues and take a look how Vim Lears has been converting preprocessed functions into templates. And this is just to prove that basically anything that is in the preprocessed function is easy to be converted into Twig. And there shouldn't be any reason to have preprocessed functions anymore. The last place after preprocessed functions is template. And that's where all the variables magically show up. And you can print them in between the markup. Let's talk a little bit more about Twig after this. So this is a very, very confusing picture of the connection between theme system and render system. So I don't know how many of you have used render system, but how it works is that if you use a render element, it will do some kind of, it does a little bit of preprocessing for that render array until it's being passed into the theme system. And after it has been rendered, it will pass it back for the render system so that a render element could be altered after it has been rendered. This is very confusing, I know, but I'm going to give a practical example of how this works. So here is a render element. I have a sandwich render element. The name of this render element is specified here in the annotation. And probably many of you who has used Form API has used the hash type text field or container or whatever form render element there is. So render form system is using render elements to render the form elements. And what I'm doing now is I'm creating my own render element called sandwich. And here is my little bit smaller render array than in the first example where everything was generated in the controller. And right here you can see that the library, let's say, is coming from here, from the render element. And what happens is every time someone outputs this type sandwich, that library will be attached to this render array, because it will be added to that render array. Also, the bread has a default value. It is always the same. Also, the condiments are always the same. So we don't want each of the render arrays have to add them manually. We specify them in the render element. And what happens after all is these two are being combined, and it becomes a one giant render array where you can see all of these items. The reason why render elements are way better than using theme system for any kind of logic is because of it is better for testing. It is also better structured than theme system. Also, it is based on set of rules that you specify instead of what theme system has is lots of expectations. Like we call these functions in certain order, and someone can come to the middle and say what happens. But instead, in the render system, it's more of you telling these things should happen in this order, and you can even change the order yourself depending on your use case if you need to do something like that. So not all of the modifications for the render array usually happen in the getInfo. GetInfo is just the static content that can be returned from the render element. So it is static and it's always the same. So it can't be dependent of the context at all. So I have here a pre-render function, which again it's being run every time that is being output. So that this is not cached, and because this one is cached always, and it doesn't have any cacheable metadata, so that it could depend on something changing. This one can depend on something changing, and there you can do whatever logic you need to do. And what I'm doing here is, if a name of the sandwich is Chicago, I will add an extra condiment for the render array. So render elements are basically before going to theme system, we are modifying the render array to be something else. But it's not actually modifying the variables, like in the theme system, we are modifying the variables before them going to the template. If you need to do this in your theme, you can use a hook element info alter, and you can add your own pre-render function in there also. And here is the callback. So this all is available in the GitHub repo. If you want to download the examples, feel free to do so. I'm going to open up the future plans a little bit. I don't know how many of you are interested of these, but it's probably, it makes sense to understand a little bit of what's going to happen in the future. So what's going to happen in the future is the theme system is most likely going to be built component-based, which basically means that we are going to take a lot of functionality from the render system and create a system that is a little bit like the render elements. But we are going to make it even easier to bundle up the data. And the reason why we want to create this component-based theme system is because we want to create a theme system that can be used by other platforms. And you can see the second issue, which is about superseding Backbone in core admin UIs with the new client-side framework in Drupal core. And what that would mean is that we have a modern front-end framework. And with these two combined, if we can create unified components that can be used across different systems, we could create a system that can be rendered either using Drupal's render system in the backend or using Drupal render system using a framework on the front end. It's pretty exciting. Here's the issues if you want to learn more about that. Let's proceed for the Twig a little bit. So the basics of Twig and how you should. This is the level of Twig that everyone should know, at least, because this allows you to do already quite a lot. So there is 3 different syntaxes in Twig. The say syntax, which is just the double square brackets. There is the do something syntax, which is square bracket and curly bracket, not square bracket. Curly bracket and the percentage. And there is the comment syntax, which is curly bracket and the hash. And when you know these 3, you get along with Twig till pretty far. So as you saw, printing in Twig happens using the double curly brackets. What happens when you print something using the curly brackets is that we go through these steps every time. So Twig has one syntax to print all the different types of data. It doesn't care whether it's array, object, or object with a method. You always use the same syntax to output your data. And what happens is that we first check if it's an array, and there's an array item with this key. If it's not an array, we test if it's an object and there is a property with that. If that is not correct, we test if there is a dynamic property that can be accessed using the magic PHP magic functions. If that is not true, we test if there is a method. Like in PHP, probably many of you wouldn't assume that this could be a call for a method in PHP. It can be also a call for a method using getMethod convention. So it could call in this object method called getCheese. It could also call a method called isCheese. And if all of these are failing, it tries if there is a dynamic method that they could be calling. If that is not true, nothing bad happens. It will not give you warnings or anything. This happens every time when a variable is being output from in a template. So every time you say this, and every time page is loaded, it does this logic every time, which might sound a little bit of slow because it's quite a lot of if logic. And what I suggest you to do, if you actually need to render lots of Twig files. What I suggest you to do is to install a Twig PHP package, which is just simply, you just simply install it, and it will make rendering Twig files a lot faster. So what it does is that if-else logic that I showed, normally it will be written in PHP. So Twig compiles itself into PHP that will run. But if you install this Twig PHP package, what happens is it will, instead of converting this logic into PHP, it will convert it into C, which is a lot faster to run. It's quite a lot of magic, but it works automatically, and I suggest to try it if you need something like that. Debugging variables in Twig. The best way that I figured out myself is Kint. It is bundled in, it comes with the devel. There is also another module, which is pretty interesting, which is a xdebug Twig extension. So if you want to use xdebug in Twig, you can actually use xdebug in Twig using the xdebug Twig extension. And what it does, it allows you to write here a Twig function, which is xdebug rake. And it simply just, what it simply does is maps that function into the PHP function xdebug rake, and it works. It's useful module if you like to debug your Twig files like that. But this is the another way, which is probably the little bit easier way, which is Kint. And in here you can see the properties of the object. You can see the available methods over there. This is not the best tool that I could imagine someone would want to have while debugging Twig, because it doesn't take care of any of the Twig's logic. So it doesn't, let's say if there is a method called getTheLanguage, it doesn't show that you can only say .language. It only shows that there is a getLanguage available, and then you have to know that it's only sandwich.language. You can say sandwich.getLanguage also. It works, but yeah, it's that you could use the shorter version of that. Twig has this little bit a unique concept of filters. They are kind of like PHP functions, but they are solely meant to be there to manipulate a variable from a form to another. And I have, as an example, a length filter. And what it does, it takes this variable as a parameter for a function mapped in PHP, and it returns it in another form. There's lots of different kind of filters. There is one good example is tfilter. It takes that variable as an parameter and returns it in another form. And in that case, it would be the right language that you are outputting the template. There's also functions that are usually a little bit more complex than the filters. They can have multiple parameters. One example is attach library, which simply just attaches a library for the current template. These are like PHP functions. There is no difference between them. But they are not the same as PHP functions, so that your PHP functions are not automatically available as Twig functions. You have to map them to be available in Twig. And that happens using Twig extension. One nice improvement in Drupal 8 is that this is also a use of the filters without filter. So in Drupal 7, there used to be hide function, which was meant to hide children render arrays so that they won't be rendered. In Drupal 8, you can just use without filter, which simply just takes this array and takes array items away from the array. The good thing about without filter is that it doesn't affect at all the render array. It only affects this one print, so that if you use this and you print it multiple times, it will comments and links will be still hidden. So it can be very confusing because you might not see the hide function where it is. Twig has also lots of logic that is very good for creating architecture in the templates. One of them is Twig blocks, and that is a very, very powerful tool that I suggest to take a look in. So what happens here is you can specify a block inside a template. And this is not Drupal block. This is very different than Drupal block. It's a Twig block. And what happens is when you create, so I'm creating here the block. You can see that here is lots of markup here. It doesn't fit this with the slide, but there's lots of markup in that template because it's a page template of Drupal. And what happens when I'm overriding that template is that I can specify a block that I want to override. And you don't have to have the whole template over there. You don't have to copy over anything into that template. You just simply create a new template and you specify that I want to override this one block. And then you override the small piece and everything else remains here. So if you have to change it, you only change it in one place instead of changing it in the multiple templates. Another good example of Twig's tools for creating architecture is macros. They are like functions, but what's the difference between macros is that you have to import them, and you import them here into a namespace, into an object, and then you can call them. So in this example, I'm importing self as an elements, and then I have all the macros available, and then I can call them where I want. So in Drupal 8, the rule number 1 is that the markup should live inside a Twig template, not in PHP. And as long as you follow this rule, everything will be good, and you will be happy. But if you don't follow this, your life might be a little bit miserable. The reason for this is in Drupal 8 we have enabled auto escape, which means that if you try to create your amazing markup in PHP, Twig will remove it automatically. It will escape it. So what happens is that it shows up on the browser. So if you don't know already what is auto escaping, I'm going to explain what is auto escaping. So let's start with what is escaping. Here, I'm calling the HTML escape. What happens is that we will convert all the possible characters that a browser might consider as an HTML into UTF characters, so that they won't be rendered as an HTML. It doesn't affect anything that how it shows in the browser, except if it's HTML that you actually want to be rendered, like this EM. It is very, very confusing when you see on the browser that it shows up this EM and it doesn't get rendered like it should be. So what is auto-escaping? It is the same, but it happens automatically for everything that is being output. So every time you output a variable in Twig, it will be escaped automatically. So the same functionality that I described will happen automatically, which can be very, very confusing. The solution for this is not to use the raw filter from Twig, which is the most common way to get over this. If you use the raw filter from Twig, you will open up your Drupal into security problems, most likely. The good thing about raw filter is that that is the easiest way to cause security problems in Drupal 8. The good thing is that it is very easy to find the raw filters. You just do search, and you can find all the possible places, all the easiest places where there is XSS security problems. The reason why we care so much about this. So last fall, you probably heard, if you've seen Dries' keynote in Barcelona, he mentioned that there is some problems with Twig, and that's why we can't release Drupal 8 right now, and we have to postpone that. There is no problems in Twig, actually. There is problems in our configuration of auto-escaping. And the reason why it was so important that we are willing to postpone the release is that 32 33% of all the vulnerabilities in Drupal core. So 33% of the times you install a security update on your client side is because of XSS, which is a big number. But that's not actually all. The whole truth is that if you also install security updates for your modules, 52% of the times you install security updates for the modules of your client side, it is because of the XSS. And it's a huge part, it's a huge number of security issues that we can get rid of. We probably don't get rid of all of them, but we will get rid of a big number of them because this makes it way easier to avoid XSS because in Drupal 7, you have to remember every time to XSS filter if you're outputting something. In Drupal 8, it's done automatically. So I'm not going to explain you how to use auto escape because it's automatic, obviously. You don't have to use it for anything. I'm going to explain how to avoid auto escaping, how to output your markup from the PHP if you need to do so. So the most common way, the best way, is to create a render array. Render array is the best way to output markup. This is a very simple render array. I'm using hash markup. Even better if you use a template, hash theme. But hash markup is a special case. What happens when you put markup in the hash markup is that we run a filter XSS on that. What it means is that we check all the HTML elements in that string if they are in a safe list that has been generated of the safe HTML elements. If it's not there, it will be escaped. The reason why this is not done for everything, because someone might think, why don't we do this filter XSS for all the things then, is because it's very, very heavy to run the regexp that is being run to filter XSS, and for that reason, it is not done for everything. So if you create hash markup and put this EM kittens in there, it will output correctly, because EM is a safe HTML element. It doesn't cause any problems. Another way is to use formatable markup. Formatable markup is the same as format string used to be in Drupal 7. Here, you add the placeholders. The placeholders will be escaped. So those are the places where is the user input, where is the data coming from somewhere. And what is left here is your own markup that you want to add. Here we know that if every placeholder is escaped, what is left here, what is added here, can be considered as safe also. So the formatable markup object that you create is considered as something that won't be escaped. This has also its caveats, this whole thing. So when is auto-escaping actually safe? Because it is not always safe. And that's true when the escape strings are being printed in HTML node. What does that mean? OK, if you output your variable inside an HTML opening and closing tag, inside, yeah. If you do it there, what happens is that completely different set of rules apply, so that escaping doesn't really help that much. Also, if you put them in attributes, it's not the rules of HTML doesn't apply in there. You can put rendered HTML in there. And let's say in the href, it has special functionality. It creates a link. If I'm putting this JavaScript thing in there and someone clicks it, it creates a nice alert XSS. And there's no character that would be escaped by this thing. How to fix this? Don't output your variables inside HTML elements. If you want to print something in the href, use the colon URL, colon placeholder. It will escape the bad protocols away, and it should be safer. Another caveat that we have is that T function returns now a object. So you can't use something that T function returns directly as an array key. You have to first cast it as a string. Remember that auto-escaping is only enabled for Twig templates, so if you use any custom templating engine or theme functions, which are, by the way, deprecated in Drupal 8, they are not auto-escaped, and they are not safe. And that's why PHP template in Drupal 8 got removed. And we added this new testing templating engine called Nyancat. And how this became reality was one of my friends said that we replaced a joke with another joke, and then we had Nyancat. We have a few minutes time for the questions. If you have any questions, feel free to ask now. If you don't have the questions right now, you can come ask me later, or you can ping me on Twitter and I will reply you over there. Any questions? No one has any questions? Oh, there is one. There's a microphone.
So the whole point is just leave markup for templates and just don't do all the last example things, right?
Yeah, that's just like if you put your markup in Twig template, none of those things you don't have to care any of that. Mm-hmm. The only things you really have to care is that you don't put the strings, the variables that you're outputting inside HTML elements. There is a special cases like attribute object, which is always inside the HTML element, but that's one of the special cases. But don't put your custom variables in there. Like, as an example, some people do that they create a text field where you can create attributes by yourself. And that's not very good because it leaves a lot of space for security problems. Thank you. So use Twig. That's my suggestion for everyone. Is there another question? No. No other questions? I guess then we are ready for the party. Vamos!